Well, hello, my name is Jim Royal. I am a huge Beatles and Elvis Presley fan and basically classic rock in general. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. If you could, do a thumbs up, that's always most appreciated. And feel free to leave comments. I always enjoy reading them and do my very best to try to respond in a timely manner. Today what I wanted to do is I wanted to do a little tribute to Little Richard. Little Richard was a true pioneer in rock and roll music. Unfortunately, we lost him yesterday at the age of 87 on May 9th, 2020. And I wanted to use this video to honor him and to specifically talk about the influences that he had on the Beatles and also some recordings that the Beatles, they would cover some of Little Richard's songs, and they may actually be in your collection. So I wanted to talk about that too. First of all, Little Richard, I mean, he was a true pioneer of rock music, okay? He belongs up there with the best of them. Yeah, he was a wonderful singer, very distinct voice, just belted it out. He was a wonderful piano player, just overall musician. He wrote some of his songs, and what I liked about him, he just had so much energy. He was very charismatic. And it was just feel good, pick you up music, and that's the kind of guy that he was, and he was somehow able to translate that and put that into his music. Some nicknames for him: the Innovator, the Originator. I like this one, the Architect of Rock and Roll. And to me, he really belongs up there with the best of them, of being one of the founding fathers of rock. With Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Bill Haley. So let me tell you about what the Beatles felt about them, about Little Richard, in their own words. When John Lennon first heard Long Tall Sally in 1956, he would later comment he was so impressed he could not speak. Paul McCartney said that he idolized Little Richard in school and later used his recordings as inspiration for his up-tempo rockers, such as the song I'm Down, which is a wonderful song from 1965, Help, the B-side to that single. And in fact, Long Tall Sally was the first song that Paul ever performed in public. And Paul has stated, he says, I could do Little Richard's voice, which is a wild horse screaming thing. It's like an out-of-body experience. You have to leave your current sensibilities and go about a foot above your head to sing it. During the Beatles Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 1988, George Harrison's acceptance speech, what he commented, he says, thank you all very much, especially the rock and rollers and Little Richard there. If it wasn't for, and he's pointing to Little Richard in the audience, if it wasn't, it was all his fault, really. In October of 1962 and November of that year, the Beatles would go on and they did a few tour dates with Little Richard. And in fact, Little Richard did a tour of Europe. And in fact, they played with him at the Star Club in Hamburg, Germany. Little Richard advised the Beatles at this time on how to perform his songs and taught Paul his distinctive vocalizations. So he gave him lessons. Can you imagine your idol giving you lessons on how to do, his songs? I mean, it's just amazing. Little Richard was born Richard Penniman in 1932. His first hit came in 1955 with the single Tutti Frutti, wonderful song. I'm going to list a few songs that he is known for. He didn't necessarily write all of these, but these are some songs that he did perform. Long Tall Sally, Slippin' and Slidin', Rip It Up, Ready Teddy, The Girl Can't Help It, Lucille, Send Me Some Lovin', Jenny Jenny, Miss Ann, Keeps a Knockin', Good Golly Miss Molly, Hey 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 Hey, Oh My Soul, and Kansas City. Alright, so here are some songs that you might have that the Beatles did perform and record. The first song I'm going to talk about is Lucille. This is a song that was never done officially for the record label EMI, but they would record it for the BBC radio. And basically in those days, artists would record their songs for BBC, and then they would broadcast them on air. And in fact, I'm going to recommend this one for a lot of Little Richard songs that they did. This is the Beatles live at the BBC. It was from 1994. And then there is a second collection which has a couple songs. This is the Beatles on air live at the BBC Volume 2. So on the Volume 1, there's a version of Lucille that was recorded in October of 1963. And then on the second volume, there's one that was recorded in September of 63. And in fact, Lucille later on, when Paul McCartney got Wings going and decided to take them out on the road and break them in 1972, Lucille was one of the songs that they performed. And in fact, there's really cool color footage of him just belting it out, and it's really, really amazing. Later in 1979, when Wings were performing, they did some dates. They performed for the Concerts for Campeche, which was a charity concert. Different acts were on there. Lucille was one of the songs that they did, and it's just blistering. It's just a really great rocker. In fact, I remember watching MTV in the early 80s, and that song would be on. They would be performing. The next song is Long Tall Sally. Long Tall Sally is a song that they recorded at EMI on March of 1964. And you know how John Lennon was known for doing Twist and Shout in one take and getting it right? Long Tall Sally, Paul did in one take and got that right. Besides that, it was also on the Volume 1 of the BBC collections. There was a version that was recorded August of 1963, and then in the second volume there's one from July of 1964. And in fact, this song would later go on the Beatle EP Long Tall Sally, which was released I think in June of 64. And then there was also here on our album, I'm trying to get this right here, the Beatles' second album. Okay, so you can find it on there. But this was a song that went back, way back to the Beatles. In fact, when they were the Quarrymen, they did it at their stage shows from 1957 until 1966. They would often perform this, and a lot of times they would close out their concerts with this song. And in fact, their last concert for their tour in August of 66 at Candlestick Park in San Francisco, this was the last number they performed. And then the third song is Kansas City, Hey, 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 Hey. This is actually two songs. The story behind this is Kansas City is a Lieber Stoller song that was written in 1952. Little Richard would do a version of it. Okay, he would record it properly. But then he also wrote another song, Hey, 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 and he felt that the second verse of Kansas City, there was some similarities. So what he did is he did an arrangement where he put them together. So that's how you get the Kansas City, Hey, 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 Hey. And this is the arrangement, his arrangement, that the Beatles would use. And in fact, they did it as, you know, from their early Hamburg days. The Beatles would go on to record it properly. In fact, they recorded it for Beatles for Sale in, was it October of 1964? And then there is also, and it was on Beatles 6 here in the States. There is also an Anthology 1 version of it, of an alternate take from EMI that you can get, you know, so check that out. But they also recorded at the BBC. In fact, on the first volume, BBC, they recorded it in August of 63, a full year before they did it for EMI, and then on BBC, the second volume in December of 1964. And then the last song that was done properly was a song called Oh My Soul. And this is a song that was recorded for the BBC. You can get it on the first volume. And that was from August of 1963. Now the Beatles, when they were doing Get Back, they often would go back and do some of their rockers and some of the heroes like Little Richard, and I remember they would cover some of these songs, just kind of warm-ups and having fun in between the proper takes. And I know that they did Jenny Jenny on there. I think they may have done, I'm trying to think here, Oh My Soul also, but I'm not for certain. But anyway, that's worth checking out. And that might actually be released properly one day, but I know on Boots you can hear some of these songs. John Lennon would later go on to do some songs for rock and roll, his album from 1975. In fact, he did, he covered on there Slippin' and Slidin', Rip It Up, and Ready Teddy. So anyway, just in closing here, I just wanted to say just you know how sad of a day it is that we did lose Little Richard yesterday. He had such a big impact on music and the Beatles. And one more last Little Richard connection with the Beatles before I leave here. The Toronto live piece in Toronto that John and Yoko did with Eric Clapton, the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival of September 13th, 1969. Little Richard was on that bill with John Lennon and Yoko during that 12-hour festival. So I thought that was pretty cool too. So I wanted to thank you very much for watching my video, and you have a good day. Take care. Bye.